Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. We're here in Pacifica, California with a titan of the musical lexicon, coast to coast. Roger Glenn, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I can't say enough about us finally meeting face to face in person finally.
It's an honor, and actually I just was hoping you could improvise a little bit more on the vibes, before we get into the conversation. People would like to see you play. Maybe a tune off your album.
Always, or as they say, always leave them wanting more, though.
At the end. This is just the beginning.
Gosh. Played this in a while.
Thank you, Master. Let me ask you, talk to the audience about why you like to have sustain and vibrato on your vibes.
Well, first off, the instrument is called a vibraphone, which means vibrato, and it has that vibrato, and I love that sound as opposed to no vibrato, which that's a whole different technique. Plus, I love the sustain of how notes blend in with other notes, as opposed to just even with the vibrato.
Right. That's there's no vibrato there with what you just played there. It was very, very kind of muffled.
As opposed to
I could listen to that all day.
And also, I grew up around, aside from my father playing vibes, but also Milt Jackson, because he sort of used a slow kind of vibrato when you heard him play. So you hear what I'm saying?
When did you when did you get did you how did you play the vibes originally, like acoustically, or did you, because I guess what I'm getting at is like not everything on the stage was mic'd, not everybody had an amp. So
No.
when you first were on the stage with your dad or even Mongol, like how did you get volume out of your instrument if you didn't have the technology to get it out?
Well, it's also within the dynamics of the band also. But the other thing is, they did have mics, and you have a great engineer. I always say the fifth person of a quartet is the sound man. It's and that, and everybody's listening, right? But if you're playing in a band where it's very loud, yeah, that's hard to compete with, in this age of amplified guitars and stuff like that, and heavy bass, heavy drumming and stuff like that. But the other thing that makes it a lot easier now for me in terms of working with bands that are a little bit higher energy in terms of dynamics is I use in-ear monitors. So when I'm using in-ear
Do those work for
monitors,
you? Those work well?
yeah, it's just like being in the studio recording, because I hear everything in balance. I hear me in balance. I hear the drums. I hear the bass. I hear the piano. I hear the guitar. I hear percussion. I hear all that in balance, so that it's like being in a recording studio.
Right. I mean, sometimes though, can you just talk about where your ears grew the most on the bandstand? Because I just feel like your ears your ears were huge because you didn't have you just said it's like being in the studio, but that seems to me to be like a fail-safe kind of thing. Before you didn't have that ability. Your ears grew because you had to listen.
Yeah, you have to listen, but what I'm saying is you hear everything in the proper balance.
Okay.
What's always hard is even when you're playing live. For me, in an acoustic situation, I don't like to have the drums between me and the piano.
Why is that?
Because the drums are going out there and it blocks the sound of the softness of the piano. So if you're right near the piano, where it curves in, you're playing there and the bass player is right next to you and the drums are over here, that makes a lot, it's in balance for me. So you hear the subtleties of what they're doing. And, a lot of drummers, if I'm playing jazz, I love to play, listen, with brushes, drummers with brushes. Joe Jones, who invented the concept of using brushes, I had the honor of playing with when I worked with my father. So I know that sound. I know what's needed. You just did an interview with Harold, and he's another great...
Harold Jones, yeah?
Yeah, he's another great guy with brushes and stuff like that. It's called taste, but... some things are just mainly just high energy. And in Latin music and a lot of Latin jazz, you're dealing with possibly timbales, you're dealing with congas, you're dealing with trap sets, you're dealing with guys playing bongos. Someone who's playing bongos is also playing cowbells necessarily or what have you. So it's all of that percussion stuff that's happening. And there's a piano player and, bass and, what have you, as the initial elements. And so it's a very driving beat and stuff like that, which is great, but you need to be able to hear the subtleties of what's going on.
Where did you begin to learn to subdivide rhythms? Was it with Mongol, or did it start before that?
Subdivide rhythms. Well, I grew up around music and my father, and also I love Latin music. My mother played a lot of Latin jazz recordings and stuff like that at home, and I had a band in junior high school that we played a lot of Latin jazz and stuff like that. We had this record, I think I told you about this before. I was coming home from school one day and came across this album. Didn't have a label on it. It washed out. It was like in the gutter, and I went and played it, and I loved it. And I said, "Who is this? This Latin album?" And I found out later that it was Cachau's Descargas, and which Descarga means jam, So
And you wore that out.
Oh yeah, I have to play the other side in order to hear the other side, what the other side was playing practically. We played it so much. Then I had the honor of later on playing with Kachow with Mongo, recording with him, and I think it was Mongo's Way. So that came full circle. And plus, I grew up listening to Cal and flute on Herbie Mann, in terms of that, but also jazz, Milt Jackson, my father, um, Lionel, just hearing a lot of great musicians of that time, and then knowing them and stuff like that.
Do you have your tenor around?
I do.
I'd love you to play a little bit.
Gosh, so you want me to set all this stuff up right now?
Well, I mean,
Should have done this before. So ask me some questions while I'm doing this.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, how much? What's the most unknown, sort of unheralded quality of the Mizell brothers that you can talk to people about?
Unheralded?
Unheralded. I mean, they're known for they're known for the albums, but what was their genius in fonts?
Well, of course, Fonts, and as well as his partner in music, Fonts was with Freddie Perrin, and they really got their big start writing music for the Jackson 5. Stuff that you see by the corporation, their publishing company, but there was stuff like ABC and stuff like that. But that got them into the music scene.
You're saying they wrote that music?
Yes.
They wrote that music.
ABC.
Yeah, because here's the thing. What did the Jacksons explain to me? What the Jacksons did, because Wilton Felder and those cats are playing the music. So the Jacksons were just singing. Maybe one Jackson was singing.
What happened was Fonts and Fonts Mizell and Freddie Perrin moved to Hollywood after going to school at Howard. They were at a party, and this woman approached them. They were songwriters, and this woman approached them and said, "Oh, you're songwriters. What do you do? Write some songs." She said, "I'd love to hear it. I'm putting together this, working with these young guys who might have some material that they were interested in, and so bring it over. We'd like to hear it." And the young kids was the Jackson 5.
Wow.
The rest is history. But from that, Fonz's brother Larry, who was also an engineer working out at in Long Island, because we all grew up in Inglewood, and he was working out in Long Island. What was the name of aviation company?
Boeing.
Huh?
Oh yeah.
No,
It'll come to me. Yeah.
But so Larry came out, and Donald Byrd, who was also a good friend in Inglewood and a friend of the Mizells, wanted Larry to put together an album, and so he was able to Larry was able to get a thing over at Blue Note Records, and the rest was history. We did Blackbird album, and that elevated them, with the biggest hit from Blue Note Records at that time, and so it was the rest was history for them. And I was privileged to be on that particular album, and so that elevated Larry's notoriety, and he had working a contract with Fantasy, wanted him to produce some stuff, and so Larry went to Fantasy and got me on to do his my Reachin album for him.
How were they so good at creating these hooks and dance grooves?
Well, I think for them, it was about creating a groove.
Yeah, right.
The right groove.
That's what I'm talking about, the vibe.
Which was a departure. Well, it was more, I was playing flute with them mainly. I did some vibe work, but it was mainly flute I was doing with them. And, it was really a departure from what Blue Note was doing musically, with Bird coming out with this different, what it was big hit with him before, Cristo Redento and stuff like that, classic jazz album. But these guys were doing crossover kind of stuff. And so it was that, another flute player who worked with them, Bobby Humphreys,
Fantastic
just totally different.
They added a lot of voices too.
Yeah,
they had a tremendous vocal stuff.
Yeah.
They were badass. Anyway, take it away.
I am more a person who works with other people as opposed to just I play off of what people are playing. That's my groove.
Let me ask you about the Santeria, the opportunities you had to play. What did you learn most about
Santeria, Mongo Santa Maria,
and Shango, what we were talking about before about his
religion?
Yeah, can you just enlighten peeps about
Afro-Cuban.
Yeah, I mean, go back to the lineage of it. Yeah.
Well, slaves came to the New World, but they still had their culture that they wanted to maintain, and that's also part of their religious culture. But slave owners really didn't want them to practice their religion, and so what they did, though, the slave owners wanted them to be Christians. They wanted to, quote unquote, civilize these heathens.
Right. They were because of their skin color. They were inferior, savages.
You can put any kind of thing on it, but yeah, that was one of the main.
And the only way to save them was through Christianity.
To give the slave masters the impression that they were really converting to Christianity, but they were really also practicing their religion from Africa, the roots of their souls coming here. So it manifested itself in Cuba with Santeria, voodoo and other lands. You look at in the United States with Carnival and all that. These have African roots to all of this. The music in terms of the instruments used, congas, bata drums, in Brazil. It's a combination of music from Africa and music from Portugal. In the Caribbean, it was more music of Spain and Africa and the United States, Northern European and African. The instruments like the vibes, that came here, that's a derivative of the xylophone, in which that was a pentatonic scale. You look at the song Amazing Grace, that you hear, and that was the history of that song was based off of a guy named James Newton. You look up Amazing Grace and you'll see lyrics by James Newton, melody traditional or melody the composer unknown. And James Newton was a slave ship captain who sought to realize the evils of what he did. And so he wrote the lyrics, Amazing Grace, how sweet the song, I once was lost and now I'm saved.
Wow.
Meaning that he was a slave ship captain and he realized the evils of his ways and he got religion. Now the melody is alleged that it's based off of what he heard the slaves singing on the voyage to the Americas, and the music was based off of a pentatonic scale, 5 notes. hear xylophones and so he'd hear this melody. Five note.
Very cool.
So, Amazing Grace, that's the melody of what he heard on the slaves coming across the Atlantic. So you see what I'm saying in regards to this combination of European and African, coming together. The European side also came up with the chromatic scale. Even the two cultures, even though we all walked out of Africa 250,000 years of human Homo sapiens, and we inhabited the rest of this planet, and we developed different cultures and stuff like that. But the roots of it was mainly from Africa. We developed, our skin got lighter as we went to higher latitudes. We were, you are what you eat in the areas, and we adapted to those areas and stuff like that. We developed mythologies and things like that, the religions that go on into this world, and the rest is history. I could go on and on about that, but the thing is,
but it's not very well. It's not very well understood.
But the point I'm trying to make is, like, in the Americas, this was initially the combination of not only indigenous people of the Americas who were here, who unfortunately a lot of them got wiped out, and that's why they brought in the slaves due to European diseases and stuff like that, and so they started to bring in slaves from Africa. But bringing in those slaves and the music that was created, for instance, jazz was could not be created in Africa. It could not have been created in Europe. It took a combination of those two groups to come together, and it happened here in this country.
It was birthed here.
Yeah, an interesting thing. A lot of people play a lot of rock and roll, and basic rock and roll a lot of times is based off of 1-4-5-4-1 progression, and the person who created that was Johann Sebastian Bach. Rock and roll, chord progressions. So you hear that 1-4-5-4-1. That's like Elvis Presley said. He said, "I made all this money on three chords."
Right.
And it's that chord progression that was created from a European, but brought here, and the rest is history. The involvement of people on this planet, it's just an exchange. It's not superior, inferior. It is just an exchange. Unfortunately, we are the caretakers and also the recipients of that history of humankind.
Can you talk about talk to the audience about the notes that you don't play and how that it's still music? I think most of what I've learned from your generation of the cats is that the space is the place, and I hear a lot of talking, a lot of language today, a lot of facility. Some cats would just call that wanking it. How did you learn to not wank it?
I'm not familiar with that term, wanking.
Well, you know what I'm getting at, though, right? I mean, just overplaying. How did you learn to create space in the music?
My father always said you got to learn not to play everything. You got sometimes, as you get older, you learn you don't have to play 1,000 notes. You learn, it's like what's happening. Years ago, I remember I was taught that actually on one note, if you hear a band play one note, the energy is such that you know from that one note the tempo, the mood, what were they saying? based off of that one note. Was it, or was it? And you hear the energy to know exactly where it's going, and that's just by feel.
You talk about how, when you first, I think this is somewhat unknown, but Paul Jackson mentioned to me that you're his cousin.
Yes.
Can you talk about the first time you met Paul Jackson?
Gosh, well, it was obviously when I was living out here in California, and Paul was on my Reachin album also, and I had known Paul. We had played together also with Azteca and various other groups and stuff like that, and just this is going back to the 70s.
71, 72?
Well, more like 70, 73, 74, because I was working with Mongo back then, 71, 72.
Right.
And and his sister, Denise Perrier, who's also related, also
Phenomenal singer.
So it's just that, and Denise and I have worked together. Paul has worked together, and I have worked together. Then Paul later worked with Herbie on the Headhunters album and stuff like that, and the rest is history for him.
Well, but I want to be clear. How did you figure out you guys were related?
Paul figured it out.
How did Paul figure it out, man?
I don't know. You have to ask Paul.
You don't know how you're related to Paul?
It must be roots from Texas. There's two.
So you don't have you haven't.
I don't have a direct link that I can say. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, at some point, were you playing with him before you knew you were related to him?
Probably, yeah.
Unbelievable. And then one day he was like, I figured.
I came out here and I met other people who are related in terms of family, distant family relations. That you have to understand the history of blacks in this country. Mm-hmm. We're scattered. We maybe DNA will reveal more, which I really haven't pursued in that regards. But you have to understand, even our names are not our original names from whence we came. We are a result of being here in the United States. I mean, there are on my father's side and there's Native American blood. There's on my mother's side. There's German blood. But it's not about that anymore. It's about human beings. People want this DNA and say I'm this. They say I'm an African American. I'm an Irish American. I'd rather have the super tribal thing of saying for right now. When they get past that, I'll give them another one. But we are Americans of African descent.
Why? Well, I mean, you're speaking truth. I just would like you to. How do you fit into? And what I mean by fit into is what instruments do you play with Taj Mahal?
Taj, I play a lot of instruments.
Talk about the instruments you play with Taj.
I play soprano sax, alto sax, tenor sax. I play piccolo. I play C flute. I play alto flute. I play vibes. I play hand percussion instruments. From triangle to cabasa to maracas to cowbell to you name it.
And how big is the band? I mean,
Normally it's like four of us play. Bass, drums, Taj, and myself. We played up in Seattle, and we had Bobby Ngano playing because he also wanted to do a thing of the hula blues from the new hula blues album that we did back in Hawaii. That won an award also in Hawaii, a Hoku Award for best blues album in Hawaii. But Taj, Taj goes in so many other directions, and he's worked with so many different people, and people who've worked with him. But, this setting has been really great in regards to a small, intimate thing, where it's really new music.
So, who's the rhythm section in the band? Is
Kester Smith on drums and Bill, what's Bill's last name? But it's bass, drums, and Taj playing different guitars.
Does Taj? What is his like? How would you describe his his rhythm? Like if we're talking about shapes, I mean, does he have an angular style? Like how does his rhythm drive the band?
Gosh, we play different kinds of music. I mean, it's not the stuff that he plays. You know, it's a group effort. It's not just Taj doing this. I mean, we do stuff that goes from the real down home bluesy kind of things when he's playing banjo, to African feel, to various things. It's just that our backgrounds are such and our exposure has been such that we blend in terms of in the feeling of the music. I mean, that's the way it is with a lot of bands who I've played with. I've had the opportunity of playing different kinds of music aside from just jazz, aside from just Latin music, Middle Eastern music, Indian music, understanding the concept of music in Asia. The concept there is not, it's what cultures developed. Like a lot of you hear a lot of Asian music, and a lot of it has to do with the environment, the waterfalls, the mountains, and stuff like that. Jazz is about maybe like Dizzy wrote this song, and then she stopped about a woman walking down the street and seeing the way her backside was moving. It was like a rhythm within itself. It's it's a totally
good for Diz, man.
Yeah.
What was it called? What was the song
Then
called?
she stopped. The song was da 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 da, and she's walking da 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 da. Then she stopped. She stopped to look at something, but it was like you just got a picture of this woman and the way she was walking down the street, and obviously she was.
But with you, I mean, isn't it the key ingredient the fact that you and Taj come from different kind of musical paradigms? The gumbo, it's about
you
gumbo.
See, the thing is, what is the difference? We all come from the same roots. Everybody tries to put everybody in a box.
Right.
And you're not realizing that the music is the expression, the exchange between one person and another. It's not about, well, he comes from this and I come from that. I've played flute and vibes in environments that, don't normally make the traditional instrumentation that people are normally used to seeing, but I do that. And, working with my brother, and he's into R&B, early R&B, 60s. He used to work at the Peppermint Lounge and places like that, and had a band that was playing those kinds of hits that were there in that time, playing at Trudy Heller's and various other things, and I would play flute with him, just flute. And the tradition was like he had an organist, Steve Shadani had a bass player, guitarist, various people there, a drummer, Tony Parker, and a singer, and they were doing stuff of Joey D kind of stuff, and I would be sitting in with them playing flute, and flute was like flute in a band like that just wasn't heard of, because people think, well, these are traditional instruments, and they hear something else, it won't
I do.
fit. But it's not about that. It's about how you interpret what you're hearing.
Can you just give the audience? You were very close with Dizzy Gillespie. Could you talk to the audience about how he originally connected with Chano Pozo?
Well, Dizzy and my father were in Cab Calloway's band, and also in that band in the 40s was Mario Bowser, who was a saxophonist who was married to Graciela, who was a sister of Machito, and Mario would also play in Machito's band, and he would invite the guys with what's his name, Heidi Ho,
Cab Calloway.
Cab Calloway, over to hear the band, and Dizzy was the one who really got it, and really interested in this Afro-Cuban music, and Mario introduced Dizzy to Chano Pozo, And like when I was working with Dizzy would always say, like, when we would do Manteca, boom ba boom ba boom ba 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 da da do da da do da 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 do da da do da 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 do da 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 do da do da do da da, and Dizzy would say, and this is the part I wrote, the bridge, ba da da da. Boo da do da do da do da do da. So it's that combination.
Wow.
It's the mixture of the two. But that bass line, that's the bass line. But the melody is ba 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 da 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 da, and you hear boom ba 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 boom ba. So that's how that came about. And you hear that kind of line in the other things, but that's just an example of the synergy that happened between these two guys coming together and the music that happened. It's people exchanging ideas with each other. That's what it's all about. I mean, plus the other thing with Dizzy, and I realize that, I say that, the history of what it, let's talk about, and this really revolves around anything of how you get into it. First thing is inspiration. So what has to happen is you have to be inspired. You have to hear people who you say, oh wow, I really like what's going on with that. So I want to play that instrument, let's say. And so what you do is you get that instrument, you start practicing. And so what are you practicing towards? You're imitating. So it's from inspiration to imitation. So you're trying to practice how to play like that person, and then you reach a stage of emulation where you're creating your own sound based off of your practices and stuff like that. So you're becoming really, really good. So it's inspiration, imitation, emulation, and the last one of major consequences is innovation. And there's very few people, when you think about it, who are innovators, who create a whole different sound of music. Dizzy was one of those people. We have people who they say, well, they're very big innovators today, but are they really musical innovators, or did they have a great team of publicists that put them out there to may say that this is a genius?
Right.
So,
they look a certain way, or they have a certain amount of Twitter followers, but they really haven't. I mean, but Dizzy.
So Dizzy was the one where I said, here I'm playing with an innovator. It's like Einstein coming up with, a totally different theory, or Newton coming up with a totally different theory of how the world is, standing on the shoulders of giants, that you realize what's going on. And then I'm exposed to, like an Afro-Cuban music, and working with some of the greats, of Cubans who came to this country. There was 5 great congueros initially who came here after Chano Pozo. That were really well known. That was Mongo Santa Maria, who I worked with, Armando Peraza, who I've worked with. There was Francisco Aguabea, who I've worked with. There's Candido, who fortunately is still alive with us, and also Potato, who worked with Herbie Mann. And I've been, not as extensive with Candido and Potato, but Potato used to work with Herbie Mann, so I used to catch them a lot. Candido used to play opposite my brother in a club in New York called Trudy Heller's. So I've been exposed to all of this, and the conga playing in this country is an outgrowth of what these guys have brought into this world, into our world of the United States.
Do you feel that our culture is being stifled in this country?
Stifled. It's not stifled. It's just gone in another direction. Like part of the direction you have to realize in terms of generational. We have these windows of what we know, and there's the window before and what's going to happen afterwards. But you're living in this window, and that's all you see. And sometimes you need educators to bring you into what was happening in the past to bring you into this. But the problem is, a lot of times in music in this country, is the fact that we don't have music programs happening in the schools, junior high school, elementary school. I started playing formally in 4th grade. There's schools here where they don't have music programs. I mean, you look at the history of some of the most influential music of the day is hip hop and rap, and what's going on with that, and what are the origins of that. That goes back to rhymes and stuff like that. A lot of that isn't necessarily singing voice, pitches and stuff like that, as opposed to expressions in terms of rhymes and how those beats fit the rhymes. And I learned a thing that's interesting from rappers, like jazz musicians. Like, how does a jazz musician practice? A jazz musician plays scales, plays arpeggios, learns songs, different scales, different chordal progressions and stuff like that, and understand that and how that fits with their instrument that they're playing. Rappers practice, like freestyle rapping is basically, how do you practice freestyle rapping where you're able to practice rhymes that will fit within a groove and stuff like that. That's how they practice, just like jazz musicians practice. I mean, it's different. It's a different art form, and it's a valid art form. Some of them, you may not like the lyrics or the fact that it's inner city expressions, but like in jazz, it's been the same. If it's Billie Holiday singing about strange fruit, to rappers talking about police or what have you, it's the environments that they live in. I mean, it's. I always say, what happened, from sophisticated lady to the bitch better have my money. That's just...
there's a lot of It's pretty.
Well, you have to understand.
There's no essence or mystery. It's just sort of.
Well,
here's the thing.
You have to understand the circumstances by which it comes about, and the circumstances by which it comes about in terms of being able to be appreciated what we did. I mean, music, even jazz in this country, is not appreciated. You have to go out. You had to go to Europe. You had to go to Japan in order to be appreciated for what this American art form is.
Right.
And so here we've broken those lines of the progression of jazz. I go back. I am privileged that I know the roots of jazz with my father working with Louis Armstrong, and get a chance to understand that part of the history and what they did and how they played and stuff like that. That is the lineage. That is my window. Before that, I understand, and where it can go beyond that. Musically, I have no hesitancy in terms of modern music of today, of performing that. It's just that a lot of this nowadays is about image. It's not about capabilities. But you get some musicians in a room and they just start working on music, and I have no problem with interacting with that. It's just a matter of how people look at those things.
Do you feel secure that if music was taken away from you tomorrow, that you'd be at peace with yourself?
If music was taken away from me?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, I have other interests. I'm a pilot. I like to fly.
You flew with Donald Byrd before?
Yeah, Donald Byrd flew with me. Let's just get it straight.
You flew, and then you taught Byrd how to fly.
No, I didn't teach him how to fly. Donald Byrd was a pilot, and he stopped flying for a long time, and we were doing his Blackbird album, and he found out that I was a pilot, and I was flying, and I said, "Oh, you want to go flying sometime?" He says, "Yeah." And so we went flying, and he said, "Man, this is great." Took over the controls for a little while, was really happy with it. it was a plane that I rented down in LA. We were flying out of Torrance, and then we land and we're ready to go back down to do this recording session because, you know, the other guys were laying tracks. And I said, okay, man, we'll get there in time. He says, no, wait a minute. He had made a phone call when we landed. I think we flew to Catalina Island, and while he was there, he made a phone call. And we came back down, and there were these ladies waiting to go fly with us. So we went up again, and we went flying, and then we came into the session, and we were a little late, but, you know, he didn't care about that. So anyway, we did this album. It was a big hit. He made a whole bunch of money, and then he bought a plane, and he started flying again. So that is the story of Donald Byrd and flying airplanes. He didn't take me flying. I took him flying, and he got back into the thing and said, oh, man, okay, I'm doing that. So as a result of the hits that was happening with Blackbird and Street Lady and all that, he bought a plane.
Can you could you finish with a tune for your father?
A song for my father?
The vibes, yeah. Before we wrap up, people really had a ball, you know, listening to you rap and wisdom.
Gosh, my father did many. Just check out Tyree Glenn with Louis Armstrong.
No, it's a homage to your father. Good night from Pacifica. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.